Hello. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Role Playing Guys. This is Spencer hopping in here for another quick intro. This is a break in our regular scheduled programming because of a variety of reasons. A few of us have gotten sick. It's been a little bit of a holiday here, and there have been lots of conflicts in our schedules that have disrupted our recording schedule. Nevertheless, we wanted to provide you with something that would be at least a little bit useful. So Nick and I, we got together and created this baby of an episode about how to create a character in Wrath and Glory. We bring Big Peter to life. If you haven't followed us on social media, we're all over Twitter, Insta, Facebook, and YouTube. We post a lot of awesome content there that will help you in your own campaigns, as well as just awesome, funny stuff that's great to see. We also have an email account if you want to reach out to us. Our email is rolepg13@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. You could also check out our website, rolepg13.com. If you like what you're hearing, have a game suggestion, are creating a game and wanted it tested, or just want to talk to us, don't hesitate to reach out and speak to us. We love to hear from you all. Speaking of talking to us, please send us all your game suggestions for Season 7. We're looking through the games that we already have, but we want to know what you want to hear. If you don't suggest anything to us, we're going to record ourselves sitting in silence for 1 hour increments and post those. The stakes are real. Finally, thank you so much to our patrons over in the land of Patreon, Brad, Joel, Steven, and Diego, who are the fuse to our fireworks. Without you, we'd be lame boxes of cardboard sitting with a crazy amount of gunpowder jammed into us. How is this legal? I don't know. Anyway, that's all I have. Let's get to the episode.
Hello everyone, welcome to a little side episode of the Role Playing Guys. As much as we would love to have another full episode ready for you, Tyler is feeling really sick. And not only that, but there's just a lot of unfortunate scheduling conflicts. There's a holiday coming up in the US and everything. So, but we still want to be able to, get content out to you guys, to you listeners. And also we enjoy talking with each other and talking about the games that we're playing. So here we are. I'm Nick, and there's Spencer as well.
Yeah, hey.
So Tyler's sick. Danny has a busy work schedule. So the two of us, Spencer and I, decided we wanted to talk about the character creation process. At least the best that we can.
We were talking before we got on, and we agreed that it's a little bit convoluted and difficult to get a good understanding of exactly how to do this when just reading the rule book without having somebody explain it. So we're answering the question that nobody asked us to answer, which is how to make a character.
Exactly. And also, it should be noted that like Warhammer and Warhammer 40k is just kind of known for at least to me, as I've seen it as a very complex franchise in general. And so
I think they kind of take pride in that a little bit, to be a little bit inaccessible.
I mean, like, there's just there's so much world building, and like I've never played the miniatures games, which is the original war games, but I've seen people play them, and there's just a lot of talk and stuff. And the war games don't focus on role playing; they focus on the strategies, and we put units here, and we're going to put a ruler here and put them, move these so many inches, and you have like 3/4 cover or whatever, things like that. But anyway. Yeah, so what we're going to do, we have the Wrath and Glory core rulebook up, as well as also Tyler made a very useful document for us, the players, for this particular campaign, so that we have a better idea of what we're doing. I guess we're just going to go step by step, huh?
Yeah, I think we'll refer to the instructions that they provide in the core rules, the 8 steps I think that they outline, as well as the use Ty's 10 steps as well to kind of explain things a little bit further.
Mm-hmm.
So, without further ado, let's start with step 1, a very good place to start. According to the core rulebook, it says to create a concept to fit the framework. So this is your standard, what type of character do you want to play thing. So consider the realm that you're playing in, the world that you're playing in. What is the GM wanting to do with their story? What are you wanting to play as a character? And kind of create a character in your mind that has specific things that you want to accomplish or be when you're playing the game.
Well, I think first of all, like it says, create a concept to fit the framework, and from what I understand, the framework, quote unquote, is basically what the GM has in mind for the type of game you want to play. Do you want to play just a set of Space Marines, or do you want to you want to play on the orc side, or do you want to mix it up a bit? For example, Tyler's framework is fairly loose. He let us kind of pick just about anything that wasn't an orc.
I think we probably could have played an orc. I just think it would have been difficult. He never said no to that, but
yeah. So he was fairly open, but like you can also have a more strict framework as well. Like an example in the core rulebook is basically just having a squad of Imperial fists, just a group of Space Marines and everything. So another possible concept framework. Usually we think of like Space Marines, like the human or superhuman. What if it was a group of Eldar going into, and having adventures in and out of the warp, perhaps? Perhaps that could be the framework.
I think for the case for today, for us, let's try and stick to what people will most likely build, which is somebody in the Imperium, a Space Marine of some sort. And let's go with that.
The rules are already convoluted. I guess we probably should keep our explanation
simple as possible.
But anyway, there's some examples of possibilities there in this game.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, probably the most simple framework I can think of is a squad of Space Marines, right? And that's the example they show in the book as well. A tactical squad of it says Imperial Fists in there. There are different chapters. But say the GM just wants kind of more of a focused Space Marine military sort of campaign. So that would mean each of the players would create some sort of concept within that relatively strict framework, which, there's different options in there.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a wide range of what you can be within that. So after you come up with the concept of what you want to play that's within the framework that the GM has created, you need to choose a species. And like we were saying, we're listing off a few different species, but to kind of recap, there's the Orc, Human, Eldar, Adeptus Astartes, and Primaris Astartes. So those last three might be a little bit unfamiliar for listeners, so let's go through those. The Eldar, Nick, you could probably explain that pretty well.
Eldar, a very simplistic explanation, is basically space elves, I suppose you could say. That was what I was told right off the bat when I first heard about these things. But yeah, they tend to have, at least Eldar characters that I've seen and heard about, they tend to have more of a magic or sort of cosmic focus as opposed to more militaristic humans. I guess it also should be mentioned as well that in all of the character creation process, you have what are called build points. And part of the framework that the GM comes up with, there are different tiers of play. Tier 1 being like, your newbies in war, kind of, basically, up to tier 5, which is like your agents of fate. Our game in the podcast, Tyler decided we'd be in the middle, tier 3. You get 100 build points per tier. So when we did tier 3, we had 300 build points. Build points are spent on pretty much everything, even the race you are. Eldar, for example, costs 10 build points if you want to be an Eldar. But yeah, Eldar tend to have more like psycho. They're psycho-sensitive. They have more sort of like psychic magic or cosmic abilities, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that more or less explains exactly what they are. And yeah, explains the idea of build points in relation to species. In a lot of other games, you can just choose whatever species you want without many consequences. When you choose a specific species, though, there are certain things that you get as bonuses. For example, you get bonuses to your attributes or whatever based on the specific species that you choose. That's also worth noting. It isn't just something that costs build points. You also get benefits for doing it as well.
Right.
The next one that we were going to say was the Adeptus Astartes, and that is for, just to summarize, that's a Space Marine, which is a genetically and cybernetically modified human to more completely do what the Imperium wants them to do. And within this species of Space Marine, there are a bunch of different chapters that you can choose.
I have the list of chapters.
Okay.
But yeah, they all have cool names like Blood Angels, Dark Angels, Imperial Fists, Salamanders, Iron Hands. There's a brief description of kind of like the philosophy behind each of the chapters, as well as a few like small abilities or passive perks that you get as being part of that chapter as well. So that's where if you want to have a Space Marine focused campaign, that's where you're going to have a lot of your kind of variants and customization in like who you are. Space Marines, as far as I can tell, are identified by their chapter and what their chapter represents and what their chapter does.
Mm-hmm. And then the last one is the Primaris Astartes, and from what I can tell when I read through it, it seems like they're just more intense Space Marines. Like they're super Space Marines.
Yeah, I guess it seems like they're later and more advanced sort of Space Marines. They cost a lot more build points though. Like
yeah.
They're more beefy. They have more implants, for example. So yeah.
Exactly.
I will say, like, again, we mentioned orcs before. That is another race you can be, as we said. I honestly, the thing I love about orcs is their belief, how their belief works. So you could definitely come up with some really fun things there, like what Tyler did with the duct tape on the generator. So yeah, I think that's those are all the choices of races as far as we can tell in the core rulebook.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing is to select an archetype. This is kind of, some games would call this your class, I suppose, although it's more of an archetype like in the way that it was in Corporea, where it kind of defines what you do and what you're good at in general, which I guess that's what a class is, isn't it? But yeah, this is another game that calls that archetypes. And in order to take an archetype, you need to match prerequisites. Prerequisites usually meaning, something like, what stats you have to have if you want to take this particular archetype and things like that. And there seem to be a lot of different archetypes for different tiers of play and so forth. I don't know if we want to go over all the archetypes or maybe a few examples of them, maybe.
Yeah, we could go into a couple of examples, but like Nick said, there are easily like 20 of these.
Yeah, there's at least a couple dozen different archetypes with different prerequisites, like the kind of race you would have to be sometimes, or what tier of play they're in.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, the archetype that I am Renee, the person that I'm playing, is a Death Cult assassin. And that's a tier 2, so actually, because we're playing a tier 3 campaign, I was able to get extra build points in order to create, in order to kind of level the playing field of what I was making in my head versus what we're actually playing. So a Death Cult assassin, the description that they gave in the summary of it is just somebody who is extremely devout to the Empire and to the Imperium in general, and they are, exactly like the name says, they're of the belief that the best way to honor the Emperor is to kill, so they're agile killers and express their worship through killing.
Yeah, and the archetype I chose was a Scitarius, or Scitari, or plural. It is a tier 2 archetype. You'd have to be human, and so basically, as I think has been explained in a few times in the campaign itself, people so they're part of they're part of worlds that adhere to the Adeptus Mechanicus. They're warriors that believe that their flesh is their greatest weakness, so they modify it with many upgrades, implants, things like that. So it's more of a tech. It's more of a bunch of tech upgrades, and that in augmentations, and that affects one of their abilities is that because they're heavily augmented, they don't bleed, and they gain a slight boost in their soak tests as well. So, but you have to have a certain amount of toughness for that.
So why don't before we get too far down the road of just explaining everything, let's actually build a character as we go along. And that might be the easiest way to explain exactly how to build a character. We'll create a tier... Let's do a tier 2 character.
Yeah.
With 200 build points, I think that gives a pretty good explanation of what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look on page 69 of the core rulebook, you'll get the restrictions that you have based on the tier that you're playing. So at the bottom, it says that as a tier 2 character, you're going to have 200 build points. Your attribute maximum is a 6, or base attribute maximum. Your skill maximum is a 5. Your maximum starting talents are 3. Max psychic powers are 4. Max dice pool bonus are 5. And max difficulty penalty are 5. So a lot of those numbers won't mean a lot right now because we haven't explained them. But as we continue to explain, they'll make more sense. So with 200 build points, what kind of species do we want to choose, Nick?
Do we want to go with the do we want to go the sort of Space Marine route? The what is it? Adeptus Astartes, or do we want to? Yeah, I mean, I think that's like the classic Warhammer 40K sort of thing.
Oh yeah, I think we're going really vanilla here in what we're trying to do to explain it as well as we can. And
I was tempted to go Orc, but let's stick with Adeptus Astartes.
All right, so with Adeptus Astartes, that costs 50 build points. We have a base tier of 2, perfect, we're already that, and a speed of 7, and those are just things that you start out with automatically when you choose that. So we'll name them Big Peter. And tier 2. And since he's just starting here, he is a rank 1. And I have the character sheet open, so I'm just going off of that. With his species being Adeptus Astartes, when you choose that, you get specific attribute modifications to begin with. So you get a +1 to strength, +1 to toughness, +1 to agility, and +1 to resolve. So we can add that 1 to strength, 1 to agility, 1 to toughness, and 1 to resolve. Resolve is a little bit different because that is actually technically a trait and not an attribute, and we'll explain traits later as well. Mm-hmm. In addition to getting the specific traits, you have special abilities. So Space Marine Implants, Honor the Chapter, and Angel of Death. And those are specific ideas. Those are specific things that are explained in the Space Marine section. So now we have all that copied down. Space Marine Implants, Angel of Death, Honor the Chapter. And those are things that we get just for choosing that specific species. After we have chosen the species, we're able to choose the archetype.
An archetype that I might suggest is another basic one, but there's Space Marine Scout here. That's one where you specifically have to be Adeptus Astartes. There are a few other ones for Adeptus Astartes. For example, there's also Tactical Space Marine as well. Mm-hmm. Or Primarius Intercessor.
I like the Space Marine Scout. I think that is probably that's a pretty basic one, and it's going to be easy to explain as we continue. There's Stealthy Warriors Adept at Reconnaissance. Yep. They cost exactly 20 build points as well. So now we still have 130 left. So we still have enough.
So yeah, it is also a tier 2 archetype. So quite fitting for tier 2 play.
Yeah, the guy who on page 127, when you look at the drawing that they have, he looks kind of like Lex Luthor or Patrick Stewart, but like if Patrick Stewart was a bodybuilder.
Yeah, as you know, what if Patrick Stewart had like John Cena or Dwayne The Rock Johnson's like muscles and had a large gun and some like a bulletproof vest or something. But yeah, and look kind of futuristic. That's pretty much what it is. But yeah, prerequisites. You have to be tier 2. You have to be Adeptus Astartes. Attributes. So you have to have at least strength, agility, and toughness each at 3. So there's that. And also your ballistic skill and your weapon skill should at least be 2 each.
I am just making note of those.
Mm-hmm.
Ballistic skill was 2, and what was the other?
Weapon skill was also needed to be 2 as a prerequisite.
Okay, so we have those auto-filled as of right now.
Yeah. The benefits, it talks about keywords. Now, different items or places or other or things or whatever, weapons, war gear, they have keywords, meaning that as long as you have that keyword, you are proficient with that item, you know how to use it. So the keywords here are Imperium, Adeptus Astartes, and whatever chapter you are. So it doesn't have any mechanical meaning right now, but it does help with selecting weapons or when you find a weapon or an item out in the wild and you get the keywords for that. If it's not Imperium or Adeptus Astartes or your chapter, then it's unfamiliar to you, basically.
We forgot to choose a specific chapter.
Oh, we did. You're right.
Shame on us.
Shame on us, indeed.
So looking through these, I think we should go with Raven Guard if we're going to be a Space Marine scout. Raven Guards prefer to fight covertly, executing swift strikes from the shadows and rapid withdrawals instead of protracted engagements in the open battlefield. Seems like it would make the most sense.
See, yeah, that seems to work with the idea of a scout.
Mm-hmm.
Going on ahead and either doing reconnaissance or, doing a few preemptive strikes, that kind of thing.
So they have a few cool things just to, automatically that I'll keep track of. Sorry.
Yeah, so once you have that, then we'll go back to the rest of the benefits for the archetype of Space Marine Scout. Like
I was saying, the Raven Guard, they have a few really cool things that they get automatically. For example, the Master of Shadows. A Raven Guard may re-roll up to rank dice when making a stealth check. Raven Guards may make stealth checks even under unusual circumstances, such as while running but not sprinting, or while using a jump pack. Fiercely independent as well. Raven Guards traditionally disdain using direct tactics and have a reputation for independent action. A Raven Guard Space Marine suffers 2 DN penalty to any combined action with non-Raven Guards. So actually this sounds a lot like Renee. Maybe I should have gone this route when making her, but c'est la vie.
Whatever. There's so many options that you really, there are several ways you could probably build the same concept in your head, perhaps. With a slightly different flavor.
So anyway, back to the archetypes.
Yeah, okay. So we got the keywords. So Imperium, Adeptus Astartes, and Raven Guard. They get a +1 to their influence, which is a social trait. And then they also have an ability called Use the Terrain. Space Marine Scouts receive plus rank to all stealth tests if they are in cover. With this, I guess we're on rank 1, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so +1 to... So right now, +1 to all stealth checks while they're in cover. And finally, there's war gear. It says, it gives you some options on what you have. You can have scout armor and a bolt gun, if you have scout armor, first of all. You can have either a bolt gun or a bolt pistol. You have an Astartes combat knife and 3 frag grenades.
I think for Big Peter, he would be a bolt
That's
gun.
Right. I forgot we're doing Big Peter.
Yeah, when you think about it, Big Peter isn't this, but we'll go with it.
I mean, back in the Corporea season, I was trying to build Captain Bolty, and he was basically kind of a weird sim android kind of thing, and which didn't quite work, but whatever. Each world is different.
Perfect. We have chosen our archetype, we have chosen our chapter, we have chosen our species, which means that now we have to assign our attributes. With the attributes assignment, I think Warhammer actually recognizes its difficulty here and gives you a little bit of help. It gives you suggested builds. So for example, at a tier 2, they suggest giving 3 attributes a rating of 4, and 4 attributes a rating of 3, and that would cost 94 build points. So that's their recommendation. So if we're looking at this sort of stealthy character that fights in the shadows, We probably don't need a ton in strength.
Well, the strength should be at least 3, but
it should, yeah. But I think, and we have the +1 bonus to that already. So we could have it be 3 and then get the +1 bonus without any additional cost. So that would actually be 4. Agility, I would say that should be higher because we have stealth, which is agility based.
Yeah.
So I would put that as a 4 naturally. With a +1 bonus, that becomes a 5.
Mm-hmm.
The toughness, that has a +1 bonus as well. I'd be fine with leaving that at a 3 with a +1 bonus, making it a 4.
Yep.
Then we have intellect, willpower, fellowship, and initiative. So we've given 2 attributes 3s, so we need to give 2 more 3s and 1 a 4. Or 2 more 4s.
Oh, so half and half. I think if you're in a chapter, I think fellowship would probably be a little bit higher.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
As well as initiative. Initiative is definitely among intellect, willpower, fellowship, and initiative. Initiative is probably the most closely tied with the field of battle.
I agree. So to summarize, we have a strength at a rating of 3, but with the +1 bonus for being Adeptus Astartes, we have a 4 actually in our rating. So that goes in the adjusted rating column. Then we have the agility at a 4, but with the +1 bonus in the adjusted rating column, that becomes a 5. We have a toughness of 3, but again, in the adjusted rating, that is a 4. Then we have intellect at 3. We have willpower at 3. We have fellowship at 4. And we have initiative at 4. And that will cost another 94 build points. So we are 70 plus 94. We have spent 164 build points. We have 36 left.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so that's the attributes.
Mm-hmm. So a note when using build points in the future or upgrading your build points, on page 156, it gives you a breakdown of purchasing additional attributes. So in order to go from an attribute value of 4 to 5, it would cost 15 to get to the next one.
Increment. Oh, yeah, from 4 to 5. Yeah, it would cost 15 to go from 4 to 5. There's a chart there. Yeah. It's weird because it gives the total build point cost. So, like, if you were to build all the way to 5, you would need to spend 33 points to get from 0 to 5 or 1 to 5. Mm-hmm. But it also gives the incremental build point cost. So, from 4 to 5, it's 15.
There's also a table attribute limit. So if you are a tier 2 character, you can't have any base attribute above 5. So if you have anything above, you can't spend more than 100 build points on one specific attribute, is what they say. Or in total, sorry.
So I believe after attributes, you have, skills is next?
Actually, traits.
Traits, that's it, yeah. So on page 158, it gives you a table of how to calculate each of the traits, which is nice.
Traits are a little bit tricky because I think they're a little bit tough to understand until they're explained. For me, I didn't get traits. I thought it was another thing that you had to choose, like skills, essentially. But They aren't. They're automatically calculated amounts.
Yeah, it's like, I'm sure we try not to, but we played so much D&D before we started the podcast, that we're used to having ability scores and skills, and those are the main sets of numbers that we have to deal with. And here there are, you have the main ability scores or attributes in this case. There are skills, of course, but there's also all these other different sort of traits. And there's a lot of them, too. There's combat traits, mental traits, and social traits. And there's different calculations for each of them. For example, defense is a combat trait, and the chart on 158 says defense equals initiative -1.
So in this case, Big Peter has a defense of 3.
Yeah. Do you want to just go over each of the traits, I guess?
Yeah, why don't you explain the trait, tell how to calculate it, and I'll just put it in the sheet.
Sounds good. So defense, if I'm not mistaken, there are still some things about combat, especially using combat traits, that I still am trying to wrap my head around, even after we've played like 6 or 7 episodes of this. But the basic roll in the game is like you use a bunch of d6s, and a 4, 5, and a 6 is a success, while a 1, 2, or 3 is a failure, and a 6 is 2 successes. In order to hit a creature, in order to deal damage, you have to roll at least that many successes, right? So to hit Big Peter, a creature would need to roll at least 3 successes on their attack roll, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly, yep.
Yep, okay, cool, I got it. Next is resilience. So this is, you could add your armor into this, but your standard resilience is toughness plus 1.
With Big Peter, his toughness is 4, his adjusted rating, so his resilience is 5.
Yeah, I believe his armor will be added onto that later when we figure out what the stats of his scout armor is. Resilience, when damage is done, correct me if I'm wrong, when damage is done to you, like so if someone hits Big Peter, they rolled 3 or more successes, and so they deal damage. They deal, say, 7 damage. It wouldn't do anything to Big Peter because, well, no, hold on. What's his resilience right now?
His resilience is 5.
So if they deal 4 damage or 5 damage to him, it wouldn't do anything because he's resilient up to that point. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Essentially, resilience is kind of like the additional armor that you have. For example, you can be hit with something in Warhammer, but not necessarily hurt. That's the way that they explain it in the book. So Big Peter...
I think other games like D&D actually, the phrase D&D uses is damage threshold. For example, a lot of vehicles or buildings have a damage threshold of, say, 10. It won't take any damage unless it takes more than 10 damage at a time. Yeah. So it's kind of the same thing. Except this game is calling it resilience. You need to deal at least like more than that much damage to even deal actual damage, which is called wounds here. Mm-hmm. So the next combat trait, there's 6 combat traits. So the next one is soak. Soak is calculated by just toughness, your straight toughness rating. So let's say that someone deals 7 damage to Big Peter. They got more than 3 successes, and they dealt 7 damage. He's resilient for 5 of it, so that leaves 2 points of damage left. You can roll to soak damage, which would spend a little bit of your shock to do, and we'll get to shock in a little bit. So what would Big Peter's soak be?
Big Peter has a soak of 4.
4. So he has 4 dice, 4 d6s to roll. And the number of successes he rolls in that soak check, that's how many points of damage he can ignore, that he can just soak. You know, if he got at least 2 successes, he would not take any damage at all. Although he would have spent a point of shock in order to do that soak roll. So to use soak, it costs a little bit, but it doesn't wound you at all.
Mm-hmm. It essentially is protection from taking actual damage. It's kind of temporary hit points, for lack of a better term.
Shock is kind of the temporary hit points. Yeah, we'll get there in a second. So the next one, so it's not listed on page 158, but the next one on the character sheet is speed, which is dependent on the species.
Big Peter strangely has a speed of 7.
7, which is 35 feet, right? Like one point for every 5 feet you can go?
Yeah, I think so.
I think they tried to implement the sort of ruler mechanic in the wargaming into this one or something. Because I know, for example, Maximilian has a speed of 6. And I have in parentheses 30 feet, I guess. Anyway, there's that. So moving on. So now let's get into shock and wounds. So shock, like Spencer said, is kind of like temporary hit points in a way. If you want to, again, we're using D&D brain here to try to wrap our head around it. Shock is calculated as willpower plus tier. You know, tier being 2 and willpower being whatever Big Peter has. So yeah, what shock does he have? How much shock does he have?
He has a total of 5, so tier 2 plus willpower 3 is 5.
5 shock. Okay, so we talked about using soak earlier, right? So if Big Peter wants to soak that 2 extra damage from earlier when someone dealt 7 points of damage, he was resilient for 5 of them. This leaves 2 left over. In order to soak damage, he needs to spend 1 point of shock in order to do that. And then if for some reason he doesn't roll any successes at all, then he can choose to either have those 2 points of damage his shock or his wounds, right? Can you choose between them, or does it go directly to wounds?
If you fail completely, you still get charged, the amount that you
Yeah,
get
you still
charged
get the
the
1 point of
plus
shock.
however many you're trying to soak.
Yeah. So wounds is toughness plus tier. So what does Big Peter have?
Big Peter has a toughness of 4 with his tier of 2, so a total of 6. Okay, soaking. Heroes and some NPCs may soak a roll. The roll to soak is not a test, does not use the Wrath die, nor does it have a difficulty number. Thus, the soak roll is unaffected by anything that increases the DN, such as being wounded or heavily wounded. Wrath may be spent to reroll failures on a soak roll as if it were a test. Soak rolls represent the character's ability to shake off incoming damage. This can take the form of split-second reaction that turn a solid hit into a mere graze, incredibly dodging that sways the character out of the line of fire, blah blah blah. When choosing to soak, follow the steps. The character suffers 1 shock. The character must roll a soak roll. Count the total icons. Each icon or success converts 1 wound into a shock. After soaking the damage, any remaining damage is inflicted as wounds.
Okay.
For heroes choosing to soak wounds, the cost is 1 shock plus an additional shock per wound negated immediately after the toughness roll. So, in other words, if we go back to the example, Big Peter gets hit. It beats his defense of 3. He has taken 7 damage. That's the damage that the enemy has rolled. So his resilience is 5, automatically negates 5. He rolls a soak roll, and he has a pool of 4 in his soak. Because he's rolling to soak, that automatically costs him 1 shock.
Yep.
With his 4 rolls, he gets 2 successes, or 2 icons. That means that 2 of his shock are taken. So if he succeeds, then the damage doesn't go against his wounds, it goes against his shock. So his shock goes from 5 to 3.
There you go. So you're soaking to redirect the damage from your wounds to your shock. That's what it was. Mm-hmm. I think I've been doing that wrong a fair number of times.
I think we all have.
Oh, well. That's the process of learning, right? We do this so other people don't have to, right? That's kind of why we do this. But there you go.
So if you fail, it doesn't reduce your soak pool. You always have your soak pool. I think if you fail, it doesn't charge your shock pool. It just goes directly against your wounds. So in the example of Big Peter getting hit with a 7, 5 immediately negated. He rolls his soak pool of 4. He gets 0 successes. So it costs him 1 shock because he wanted to roll. And he takes 2 points of damage against his wounds. So he has a total of 4 left over. Ta-da. It's that simple. It's that easy.
Well, once you figure it out, like you get used to it, right? So yeah, if you don't want to take damage to you, if you don't want to have your wounds depleted, then yeah, you try to soak it, definitely.
And you want to soak because taking wounds can affect the difficulty of other tests. If you have more than half your wounds taken, then every difficulty increases by 2 or something like that.
Yeah.
Like it gets pretty gnarly pretty fast.
Yeah, indeed. So those are all of the combat traits and an explanation of battle, I guess. Let's move on to mental traits. So we should be able to go through these a lot faster.
Yes.
So first is conviction, which is just straight willpower.
In Big Peter's case, that is 3.
Okay. Corruption starts at 0. Different things in the game, depending on according to the GM's discretion, can affect your corruption.
Yes.
And conviction, by the way, is your ability to resist the forces of chaos and corruption. So, and corruption is how much you are corrupted. Passive awareness is equal to half of your total awareness, like your total awareness skill. So I don't think we've calculated the skills just yet.
Nope, traits come before skills.
Yeah. But just know that passive awareness is equal to half of your total awareness. So kind of like I'm as far as I know, that's pretty much like passive perception in D&D, and like actual active perception. It's the difference between trying to look for something or just kind of like noticing something off the corner of your eye, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, you have resolve, which is will -1, and I believe there was a bonus to resolve from earlier.
Yes, as an Adeptus Astartes, you get a +1 to your resolve. So for Big Peter, he has a willpower, or what was it again?
Willpower -1. So for him, it's just straight willpower.
So yeah, +1 -1 totals to 3 resolve.
Yeah. So this represents your character's courage and your overall morale, basically. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense for a more military-minded character to have a bit more resolve. Finally, we have 2 social traits. Influence, which normally is fellowship -1, but they get a +1 bonus to influence.
So with him, he has fellowship of 4 -1 +1 totals to 4.
Yeah, so this is influence represents your character's ability to purchase or scrounge or acquire objects for your up to your desire. And also, fun fact I'm noticing in here, data is currency. I'll have to remember this. Characters with the Adeptus Mechanicus keyword may use intellect in place of fellowship when calculating influence. I did not realize that. Just a small little thing that I did not see anywhere else. Huh.
Yeah, it's only a 450-page rule book. Why didn't you remember that?
Well, that's cool. I have to remember that because that's what my character has. Intellect instead of fellowship. All right, and finally, wealth, which is just tier. So 2
in this
for
case,
Big Peter.
2. I don't know that wealth is super.
So it represents a character's access to coin and riches. It's basically, I think the difference between wealth and influence is that influence is like your ability to like use your influence to get like the best gear or best or getting the things you want, kind of a thing. They both have to do with access to some degree. But for Big Peter, the wealth would be 2 because that's the tier that he's playing at. But yeah, all it says here is wealth represents a character's access to coin and riches. Characters start with a wealth equal to tier, modified by archetype, abilities, and talents. And that's about it. And then it has a sidebar about assets in general. Abstract representation of capital. It could be hard coin. It could be a collection of fine art. It could be a rare Xenos artifact of great value. And so forth. So,
all right.
That's the end of traits.
Yeah, we have gotten through 4 of the steps. We only have 4 more. Halfway
Indeed.
done, everyone.
Halfway done. I mean, most character creation processes take a little while.
Yeah.
But anyway, skills.
I think this one takes particularly long the first time you do it, especially when you're actually thinking about what you're doing. We have just kind of said, man, this is okay.
I feel the same. I felt the same way about making a Pathfinder character.
Oh my!
Like I was trying. Like I think I spent like a total of like 3 hours trying to figure out my Pathfinder character and looking over the rules and everything.
It's freaking insane. It's freaking insane.
Man. Anyway, I mean it wasn't 2nd edition. I don't know how much things have changed. But so anyway,
probably
skills.
gotten worse if we're being real.
So skills, you also spend build points here, same way as with attributes, except we only have 36 points. The recommended is for tier 2 is 70 build points.
I don't know exactly how they can get that number when you consider the archetype cost X amount. The species, I guess if you don't choose Adeptus Astartes, you have more build points. That's probably how they do it.
Humans cost 0 build points.
Eldar costs 10, and Orc costs 10.
So I think just the fact that you are an Adeptus Astartes already gives you a lot. That's probably what it is. But we could definitely, I can't remember if there's anything else besides skills that we spend build points on. Is there?
Talents.
So for tier 1, though, the tier 1 recommendation is 31 build points. 1 skill at 4, 3 skills at 3, and 1 skill at 2. With I guess everything else being at 0, I suppose.
We have a couple, and it is worth noting that some of these you automatically get because they take directly from your attribute. So the way that these skills work is they have skills are associated with an attribute. So you add the rating that you've assigned it plus the attribute, and that gets you the total skill dice pool that you have.
Yeah, but I believe what you're buying here is the rating before applying the attribute.
Exactly. Yes. With this, we do have to remember that we need a weapon skill of 2 and a ballistic score of 2.
Yeah. So we should probably just start with that. Let's see. Well, maybe we could, since we have so few points, maybe we could just go on the point cost table on page 162.
That's a great idea.
So we already know we have a 2 and a 2, and that costs 2 points each.
Okay.
I think, oh wait, no, it costs 3 points each.
Before we do anything else, let's go through all the skills that we have.
Yeah,
so we have athletics, awareness, ballistic skill, cunning, deception, insight, intimidation, investigation, leadership, Medicae, persuasion, pilot, psychic mastery, scholar, stealth, survival, tech, and weapon skill. So a lot of these you've probably heard in other games already. Awareness is essentially perception. Medicae is medicine. Persuasion you've heard. Survival, stealth. I mean, a lot of these are pretty common.
Pretty self-explanatory, I think. It should be noted that, unless I'm mistaken, ballistic skill is specifically ranged weapons, like pistols and guns, while weapon skill is more for melee weapons.
Yeah.
Maximilian Granado's axe.
And a lot of the time with the weapon skill, and when you're making an attack with that, it adds, correction, I guess for some weapons, you add the weapon skill and the strength.
But that would be in like the stats of the weapon itself.
Okay, so we have 36 build points.
We're going to spend 6 of those to get 2 2s, basically.
Okay, so we are down to 30 build points.
I guess it just depends on if we want to build any of the other skills or save them for something else later.
We wouldn't be able to really buy any talents unless we bought it straight up. So I don't think we're going to be able to do any of those.
Okay, so should we just use the remaining 30 points for skills?
Yeah.
That's kind of where the Adeptus Astartes probably would have their points anyway, right?
Mm-hmm. The thing about talents is that they're able to help give specific abilities, I think is the best way to think of it, or they up a specific thing. Exactly.
Kind of like a feat in D&D, right?
Yeah, I guess a feat in D&D would be a good way of saying it. They have prerequisites, but they also have some really good benefits. For example, dual wielder, you have to have an attack skill of 4, but you can wield 2 melee weapons or 2 pistols. A lot of these are really self-explanatory. Let the galaxy burn, you have to have the chaos keyword, and you get a bonus. You get a glory bonus when you incapacitate an opponent. So, yeah, there are a lot of really good things that you can pick up here. So let's go back to the attributes, or to the skills, sorry. So we have 30 points for 31, which is essentially what we have. Athletics 2, awareness 3, ballistics 4, persuasion 3, weapon skill 3.
That seems as good as any. That would leave us with,
I think we should change athletics or persuasion with stealth.
Oh yeah, that's right. We're having a bit of a stealth build with this character.
Mm-hmm. So let's do athletics 2, awareness 3. That makes sense. We'll bump up the ballistics to 4 instead of 2. The prerequisite. Instead of persuasion 3, let's move that to stealth. With stealth, we already have a +1 bonus, so that's going to actually make stealth 4. And then weapon skill, I think we should assign that somewhere else because I don't think that they would be a close range weapon wielder.
Right.
Let's move that.
They do have a combat knife, so maybe have a small boost to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe a 1 or a 2 or something.
So we already have a 2 there. I'm going to do the math real quick on this. So we have athletics of 2, so then it'll cost 3. We have awareness of 3, so that'll cost 6. We have ballistics of 4, so that'll cost 10. We have stealth of technically 3, so that'll cost 6. And so we have 2 build points left.
That's enough to get us a 2 or 2 1s.
It has enough to get us 2 1s.
Oh, wait, you're right. Yeah, it costs 3 total to get a 2.
Let's go investigation. That seems like it would make sense for Big Peter.
Yeah. And either deception or survival, perhaps?
I like survival. I think that makes sense in case he gets separated from the group. He's trying to do something. That makes sense that he would have survival there.
A little bit of survival, yeah. So there you go.
So now, after we have purchased the ranks and used all of our build points, we go through and we add the attribute with the rating that we have assigned. I'm going to do this and cut this part out so you don't have to listen to it.
Well, I can. Well, yeah, if you want to give an example or two, I suppose, but...
Okay. Athletics rating is 2. Adjusted rating for strength is 4, so that totals 6 for athletics. Awareness is associated with intellect, so 3 rating plus 3 associated attribute results in 6, and so on and so forth and so forth and so on. All right, we filled out all those numbers, so you didn't have to listen to it. It took a while, but we're back.
A minute. I mean, it would feel like a lot if you had not cut it, but yeah.
It would feel like a freaking forever. Exactly a forever. So now that we've chosen all of the skills, we need to go through the talents. Like we said before, in our specific case, we aren't able to purchase any talents because we chose to go with the Adeptus Astartes build, or archetype, which really limited the amount of points that we had to build with later. So you can look through the talents on your own. Page 169 to 170 is the summary. There are a lot of them, suffice it to say that. Mm-hmm. After we choose the talents, we have to go through the war gear. When you start a campaign or whatever, you are assigned war gear based on your species and based on your archetype. So when we started this, Nick actually said the specific things that we already have. So we'll go through and explain that war gear after we get through the last step after war gear, because that's what they say in the summary section. You get war gear based on your archetype and species. You have to go to the war gear section to actually read anything about the war gear.
That's right. You were saying that before we started recording. But yeah, so getting the stats for the gun, the armor, and the combat knife and things like that. That's the stage in which you'd write down all of those things.
So after you choose your war gear, typically you're going to just get the war gear that you're assigned to begin with. But if you want additional war gear, that's something that you need to take up with your GM. And you can purchase war gear based on that. There is a lot of war gear, so take into consideration the rarity of the item and just in general the power of the item is the recommendation to the GMs, because a lot of these, even though they're not super rare, they have absurd power compared to other items that are more rare. So I don't think rarity distinctly correlates to ability of the weapon. So the last thing that you have to do is select your special abilities. In the core rulebook, the only special ability that it lists is Psychic Powers, which is something that's more exclusive to Eldar and perhaps a few other archetypes, but I think Eldar is the one that it's going to be most specific to.
Yeah. It does go in, after that, it does go into backgrounds. If you want to give your character some sort of mysterious trinket or something, or, come up with a background or some kind of origin or a motive or a goal or something, you can get into that. That's more narrative. I believe we did do that, though. Tyler is including that kind of stuff in the short campaign we're doing. If I'm not mistaken, I think we've done everything that we need for the character has been made. So Big Peter is ready to go as a beginning tier 2 character to get out and survive at least 5 minutes in Warhammer 40k.
And that's about the length that he will actually survive. if we want to go through a little bit in the war gear section, or the war gear that you get. So the war gear for each species is typically going to be a weapon, a piece of armor, and maybe tools. If you want to get anything else, that's when you upgrade. Those are things like cybernetics or vehicles. There are weapon upgrades as well. So just real quick, we chose to go with the bolt gun. So that has a base damage of 10 plus 1 extra damage, 0 armor piercing, range of 40 meters, salvo of 2. Salvos are essentially your reloads that you can use, and then when you use a salvo on there are specific attacks that you need to use a salvo for. So for example, suppressive fire is the most common one that I use that requires a salvo. Then you get specific weapon traits, which are essentially the keywords, or not the keywords, sorry. Those are later. Those are things that you need to have in order to be able to wield it. So for the bolt gun, it has bolt and Imperium. So because we're an Adeptus Astartes, we have the keyword of Imperium, so we'll be able to use that without any disadvantage. The traits are the specific traits of the weapon. So for this, it has brutal, rapid fire, and then also the value. And in this case, it is considered a 4 uncommon weapon. And the armor, let's go into armor just a tiny bit. Armor is useful because it helps increase your defense with the armor rating. So for Big Peter, he has Scout armor, which means that it has an armor rating of 4. The keywords are Imperium and Adeptus Astartes, and the value is 5, or rare. This is the reason that armor rating is really important, because in order to determine your toughness, or the resistance of the character, you include the armor rating. So in this case, with a 4, his resilience actually goes from 5 to 9. And now I think we've pretty much summarized everything that you need to know. That last little bit was a bit rushed when we were talking about armor, and war gear in general. But this was more to build a character and not to do anything else. So I think we've given everything that you need.
Yeah, indeed. So, and also this helped clarify a few things for ourselves as well. It's good to review at this point. Hopefully we'll play the game better in in these last few episodes of the season.
We're improving. But little by little. But yeah, I think that's all that I have to say. Is there anything else from you, Nick?
I can't think of anything. Did we want to bring up what we're planning on doing for our next season, or do we want to wait to announce that?
Oh yeah, I've spoken about it a little bit in intros, but yeah, let's explain that a little more.
Yeah, so we usually we like to try out like games by indie game writers, especially if they're in beta between seasons. But we've had several people reach out to us, and we have a bit of a backlog of about 4 games. So we decided to just dedicate our next season to playing those games entirely, to playing each of those games all in one season. A couple episodes for one game, a couple episodes for another, and so on and so forth. I have the list of games here in a note somewhere. There we go. Role playing guys backlog. By the way, Brad's game is not one of them, right? I have that listed on my.
I don't know.
He never gave us the game yet, right?
Why don't we say no until he corrects us?
Right. Okay. So, but what we're planning on right now, we have Flying Circus by Erica Chappell at open_sketchbook on Twitter. We have a cool and so Flying Circus. What we know is that it's like the way the way they pitched it to us was like World War I planes and everything, which sounded cool to us. So, A Cool and Lonely Courage by Alex White, at Alex White. Very niche topic. That is about female French spies in, I believe, World War II. So, based on real stories, like the setting is.
That's the one that I'm running.
Yeah.
You're running the first one.
I'm running Flying Circus. Spencer will run A Cool and Lonely Courage. Then we have Power Outage. Was Tyler doing that one?
Ty's running that one.
Yeah, that's a superhero one, I believe.
Mm-hmm. That one's particularly interesting because they say that it's meant for younger players.
So that'll be good. It's by at BEBARCE, Bebars, I guess. Sorry if I mispronounced that. And finally, a 2-page RPG called They Came from Planet Earth by Greek Geek, or at the Geekest Greek on Twitter. So each of these people have reached out to us on Twitter and sent us their game, and we haven't been able to get to these games for the past several months. Like they contacted us late last year, but now we will be getting to it in our next season. We're very excited about doing that and letting them know what we think about their awesome games.
And if you guys have games and you want them tested out, send it our way too. And maybe if we have another backlog of games, we'll do another full season dedicated to getting through the games. But
we can't promise we can't usually promise exactly when we'll play them. It depends on the length of the game and everything, and the time that we're able to put in for learning and playing the system. But we can promise that we will do that. We will play them. At least we don't have a backlog that bad that we can't promise that. So yeah, we're always happy to try new games. If we don't get requests, then we keep looking for cool games to try out. So the season after that, I'm still thinking. I'll be the GM for that one. I'm excited. So I've got a couple ideas, but we'll see. But that's a ways off.
Yeah. Well, that's all we've got for this episode.
Always have to have Big Peter somewhere in there. But yeah, that's all we got. Thank you for listening.
Bye-bye.
I found this Theron black box. I thought you might want to take a look at it.
She hands over a clear rectangle sheet of black glass with smooth edges.
Oh, wow. This is really cool.
Where did you get that? You shouldn't have that.
I found it on a Theron ship that crashed.
Maybe you could take it to a friend?
I would use the word friend lightly.
Misha walks over to a small filing cabinet that's next to his bed, and he takes a key from around his neck. He unlocks the cabinet and he pulls out 2 black cases, which are both marked with Theron symbols.
As you place it down, it instantly lights up.
You know what this means, right?
This could be the chance we've been looking for.
That doesn't sound good.
Sons of the Fathers is a sci-fi horror podcast using the 7th edition Call of Cthulhu role-playing system. It is a Necropodicon original, and our first episode premieres on the 1st of March, 2020. We advise that the show isn't for children, but is great for those who revel in hapless protagonists facing ever-increasing bad odds. Sons of the Fathers, Boundless Space, Endless Horror.
Necropodicon. Hard to pronounce, easy to listen.
Dun, da, 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 da.